It started with people posting a job listing that you had hosted on the board about helping hiring at a for-profit detention facility for federal enforcement. So you deleted that post. Do you sort of regret any sort of public promotion of those jobs, of those opportunities?
The gubernatorial race. The race no one seems to want to run for or win. Sarah, can you give us a quick understanding of why people don't want to be governor?
I think being governor is a really, really hard job.
I don't think University Heights is a real neighborhood. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the San Diego Politics Show. I'm your host, Matt Strabone, and I'm so happy you're joining us. We've got a good one for you today. First, my co-host Andrew Cate, who is also the editor of the Times of San Diego and the reason we are currently banned on TikTok, sits down with the leader of the San Diego Chamber of Commerce, Cate, for an in-depth interview. After that, I'll convene a panel discussion with a couple of very sharp political journalists about the upcoming election for Congress in the 48th District, that's Darrell Iss's seat, and also the election for governor of California. And finally, Andrew and I will wrap things up with a very important conversation. Enjoy the show.
And I'm Andrew Cate, the GM and editor of Times of San Diego, and I'm joined for the interview by Cate. He's the CEO and president of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Hey.
What's going on, man?
Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Let me start by asking you something. You are invariably referred to in news media as the last Republican.
I'm a trivia question response.
Yes. How do you feel about that being the sort of parenthetical note on every first reference for you right now?
It's part of my brand now, I guess,
yeah.
is to have that. But no, it's hopefully balance comes back from a political standpoint.
Oh, so that you lose, you want to lose that title?
No, I mean, for the sake of the region and just having good balance, sure, I'm okay with that. I don't need to have this as the have this follow me for the rest of my entire career.
Tombstone.
No, it does not at all.
Let's talk about one of those things,
sure.
Which is the short-term vacation rental proposed ballot measure, which did not make it out of Rules Committee. You were not only involved in that, I think it would be safe to say you played a big part in that not making it out of Rules Committee. I'm going to say that there's an imaginable scenario, the hypothetical scenario when you in the Chamber of Commerce find your way to supporting that measure doesn't seem that far-fetched to me. It doesn't seem impossible for me to imagine you saying, we have a huge amount of membership that comes from the hospitality industry, hotels specifically, hotels who would, seem to have some sort of competitive advantage if the Airbnb, short-term vacation rental industry had an additional tax that they don't have. And you have, advocated heavily for increasing housing supply as an answer to housing costs, which this may be able to do. There's some dispute among the sort of analysis on that. Why wasn't that the case? What was your calculation?
If there was some iteration of the proposal that was amended, and maybe it was a straight second home tax of some kind, there may have been a world in which the chamber could have got behind that or remain neutral to an extent. But the one piece I think that the chamber has spoken up a lot over since my time there has been what we feel are these attacks on industry-specific proposals. And whether it was the minimum wage proposal or now this, there were specific targets on an industry. And by and large, my board and the chamber writ large has said we're not going to be supportive or engage in those conversations. If there are broad-based solutions to address some of the problems that the city is facing, we're happy to be part of those conversations. I often remind folks that the business community, not just the chamber, but others, back in 2024, were huge contributors and supporters of Measure E, understanding that the city is in a precarious place and was back then, and was supportive and donated seven figures to the efforts to pass a sales tax.
A sales tax increase would have struck at the cost of living problems from San Diegans across the board. Why is that better from the sort of ideological perspective that you sit from?
Well, I think what the issue is down to the piecemeal approach that we're seeing now, where I think by and large residents of San Diego are feeling picked on whether it's these different fees that are being tacked on again and again and again, and execution, the results of those are not really coming out to what was promised originally to voters. And you're seeing that level of distrust increase dramatically amongst voters and residents of San Diego, where it's going to be now difficult, I think, to pass some of these broad-based sources. I think the idea behind it back in 24, when the business community supported this, was that, hey, like, let's all go in together, by and large, for the most part, and try to explain the need for this, as opposed to having larger industry groups or sectors of the economy here in San Diego push back and really have now a funded type of opposition effort to a measure.
Well, how do you feel that that sort of political dynamic has changed in the 2 years since? I mean, voters voted down that tax increase, another one that accompanied the ballot with it. And now we have these sorts of fees that have been implemented in the time since, but cost of living is as big an issue now as it was then. People living in an inflationary environment. I mean, do you still find yourself in the same place saying what we should be doing here is increasing sales taxes on either all city residents or all county residents, as opposed to these sorts of piecemeal things?
Well, what I've been saying is, let's be a part of the conversation. Let's figure out what we're trying to address with a certain policy proposal, whether the outcome we're looking for, how do we build the largest tent, the largest coalition to go out and get something either passed or approved by the council, whatever the case may be. But we want to be part of the conversation. I think what's happening now is that the business community is being demonized. We're being called extremists. We're being told that we're just extracting billions of dollars out of San Diego, when that's not the case whatsoever. But the business community, not just the chamber, but others, I think need to be part of the conversation and be enrolled in whatever policy solution is being presented or thought about.
The sales tax in 2024 was predicated on sort of finding a way to fix the structural budget deficit that the city faced. It didn't pass. The city still faces a structural budget deficit. They've come up with a handful of revenue fixes that mostly don't get all of the way there. So as the city stands right now, there's not enough revenue to close the budget gap.
Yeah.
What do you think is the solution that city officials need to embrace?
Well, first off, there's not a silver bullet solution to this. There's not going to be, again, absent some type of revenue measure that's going to be large enough to cover it. There's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution to the problem. But I think it's going to start with the mayor and the council having to be very, start developing what the priorities are for what services they want to offer to residents, because I think the status quo is not going to work.
So there's going to have to be some service cuts, you're saying?
There's service cuts, reorganization, prioritization, what have you. I mean, I don't think there's a way where you close the gap on the backs of residents and fees and whatnot. But I think first and foremost, it starts with trust. Recent poll after poll after poll shows disapproval and untrust from voters in city governments, and something's going to have to change in that regard first and foremost, just to be able to sell whatever it is the mayor and council are doing to the public and have their buy into it.
So another ballot measure that the chamber supported was the ballot measure in 2022 that cleared the way to impose a trash fee. That trash fee is now controversial, maybe not as controversial as the Balboa Park parking fees, but controversial. It's much larger than the Balboa Park parking fees. But without that, in a world without that, the city's budget picture is even worse. I mean, you're talking about real cuts in that situation where you couldn't even euphemistically talk around them based on creativity, right? It would blow a hole in the city's budget. Where are you on the trash fee? Is that something that needs to stay? Is that something that you would support overturning? There's been whispers around the city for a year now about whether some group will come forward to try to repeal. Where do you and the chamber stand on that?
We're not involved in those conversations about whether to repeal the fee or not. And if that goes forward, that's going to be a conversation with our board and our leadership to see what position we take off it. I think when the measure was put forward back in 2022, the idea behind the chamber support was that we wanted fairness, and all those who pay for trash in the city of San Diego. We do know that there are some folks, businesses, renters and like who do pay for trash and homeowners didn't. So that was I think a prime rationale for the Chamber's endorsement of being able to institute the fee. But if a conversation does shift and turn to this now being on the ballot or whatnot, that's a conversation that we're going to have as an organization to figure out where we stand on that, or if we even weigh in on it to begin with.
Okay. So now there's another issue that's come up, and it came up sort of in the lead up to the short-term vacation rental vote. Started with people posting a job listing that you had hosted on the board about helping hiring at a for-profit detention facility for federal enforcement. UK's came back with a response and said, this is a union workforce, and we've worked with them for years. What is your perspective right now on sort of the attention and the criticism that the organization has received for allying with that organization?
I think it just speaks to kind of the lay of the land as it relates to politics right now in San Diego, and that's when I came on, my promise was that the business community was going to be a lot louder when it came to policy issues.
That was what you wanted?
That's what I wanted, absolutely. Yeah, I think the business community needed to speak up and speak louder as relates to issues that are impacting the business community writ large. And I think some of the things we've done have upset the status quo, and people aren't comfortable with that. And so I think we're seeing kind of the tit for tat in that regard. And folks who are wanting to take a shot at us and try to put us in our place, so to speak. But by and large, I think the feedback that we're getting from our members and others is that we're in a position now where I think the business community needs to speak up, and we're doing that job.
So you deleted that post, and you said, you had some clarifications that this was for marshals, not ICE specifically.
Correct.
But having deleted the post, do you sort of regret any sort of public promotion of those jobs, of those opportunities?
I think it definitely spoke to the confusion, and what my hope was and continues to be is that the Chamber has had a large and vocal voice as it comes to immigration issues. The fact that this year we're going to be spending our 20th year going down to Mexico City and working with the Mexican government on issues that impact the border, I think speaks to what I believe is the credibility of the organization to speak on these matters. We have commented on and will continue to comment on inhumane treatment of our immigrant community. The Chamber has been supportive of immigration reform, we've been supportive of DACA. I think our record speaks for itself when it comes to these matters, and have spoken up and will continue to speak up. But I think the rationale for removing the post was to ensure that no one was left to believe that we have any type of relationship or work with ICE in any way.
Got it. Now, one of the responses of that was something that, maybe you can correct me on this, but I think this is the first I've seen of this, which was city council candidates saying that they will not seek the endorsement of the Chamber going forward, that there was sort of a desire for people to distance themselves from the organization. In my time covering the city, I've seen that happen with the Lincoln Club, certainly, and Lincoln Club, I think, everybody associated with both organizations would agree is a by its own definition, a further right, more of a conservative, sort of situated group. Does the job that you try to do, the role that you try to play, is it diminished if there are people who say, I don't want to be associated with the Chamber of Commerce?
It's unfortunate we've gotten to that point, but we do have candidates who are, I would say, left of center, who are still seeking our endorsement and want our support and want to have a conversation with us. We had our delegation ship up to Sacramento, and we had members of our delegation on the Democrat side of the aisle who were very supportive and worked with us and were able to speak at our events and whatnot. So I hope that's not the case. All we're asking for is someone who's willing to have a conversation with us.
So I'm trying to imagine sort of what your sort of priorities are going to shape up to be in the remainder of this year. Vacation rental tax isn't going to be on the ballot. So, that's been taken off the table, right?
Sure.
There's been other sales taxes discussed.
Yeah.
It's not clear if they're going to end up on the ballot at this point. If one did, and it sort of largely achieved basically what Measure E was supposed to 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself supporting it again?
It could happen. We're not an anti-tax organization by any means. We want to do what's best for the business community, and we're very much open to have a conversation with folks about what those solutions are.
When you look at those council races, we're now currently in a situation where we have, as you say, where I'm talking to the last Republican on the city council. So it's 9 Democrats on the city council.
Yeah.
It's a Democratic mayor. It's a Democratic city attorney. These are not
round numbered.
Yes, right. Right now, this is not a partisan question, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Right. There's rumors of certain Republicans who may be viable in some of those seats, and maybe they'll announce. Maybe they won't. But when you're looking at like a Democratic field, basically for most of those seats, and some of those seats, there's not really even going to be any talk of a Republican getting into the race. What are you weighing? Because the sort of idea of like one ideological spectrum doesn't always make a good deal of sense, right? Like if you could have a farther left candidate, sort of like a Sean Elo Rivera, who certainly would see himself as a progressive, but he's also very pro-housing and has taken a lot of YIMBY-ish positions that would be attractive. And I should say also, in addition to being the last Republican on the council, you also cast the deciding vote to make Sean Elo Rivera the council president before. So when you look at like how the city council dynamics shape up specifically in this election, what are you looking for? Like somebody who is wants to pursue a Airbnb tax and also wants to do with height limits across the board. Like how do you manage, assessing a candidate like that?
Well, I think it starts with someone who's willing to talk to us first and foremost. So that's
so the people who are willing to talk to you.
That's a baseline. But no, I think someone who's willing to listen, right, and engage in a conversation, right? It's again, we're not asking for a loyalty test where they have to agree with everything that we say or do or whatnot, but someone who's willing to maybe stand up against certain political pressures that are going to be cast upon them for voting a certain way.
He is Chris Cate, the last Republican on the San Diego City Council. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
It's a big election year, and the June primary will be here before you know it. Important races abound all across San Diego County and California. But today we're focusing on a pair of high-profile contests where the outcome in June is very much in doubt. The race to challenge Darrell Issa in the 40th Congressional District, and the frankly mystifying race to be the next governor of California. To sort it all out, we've got 2 of the premier political journalists around, the politics editor at the San Francisco Chronicle and longtime observer of the San Diego political scene, Sarah Libby, and the editor and general manager of the Times of San Diego and co-host of this very show, our own Andrew Keats. Folks, thanks so much for joining. So we are going to start by discussing the 48th Congressional District. Now, I'm going to read off some campaign finance numbers for what we're going to call the top 5 contenders for this race as of the most recent filing period. And Andy, I want you to give me a quick synopsis of each person as I read them off. So Brandon Riker raised $1.5 million and has about $1 million on hand, with the caveat that he loaned about $750,000 to himself.
Yeah, so as that indicates, he has personal wealth, which will be, something that he leans on in this race. He is from Palm Springs. This district has, now grown to include Palm Springs as part of its sort of the state Governor Newsom's attempt to make it more blue. So he'll have to introduce himself to San Diego residents. I suspect he probably has to introduce himself to a lot of Palm Springs residents as well. But he's a sort of a newcomer to the race.
Great. Next on the list, incumbent Congressman Darrell Issa raised $1.5 million and has even more than that, $2.6 million on hand. We don't need to talk about the congressman as much. He is the incumbent. We're going to assume that he's going to get through in June. So next on the list is Amar Campanajjar, who has raised $823,000 and has $418,000 on hand.
So he's run for office 3 times in San Diego County, including in this district just 4 years ago. I guess it would be 6 years ago come time for this race. He has been able to bring in a lot of money with the help of some financial support he has from his partner. He is, sort of well known in the district based on these races, but has so far been over 3 in the races he's run for.
And this is number 4. And we'll talk about his partner in a bit. And next is San Diego City Council member Marnie Von Wilpert, who has raised $520,000 and has $304,000 on hand.
Yeah, so she has, she represents the sort of northeasternmost district of the San Diego City Council, very suburban district. She's sort of made her biggest mark in local politics on gun control measures. She's a former deputy city attorney. Hasn't been able to raise a huge amount of money so far, but has been elected by voters. Not voters that are in the district she's running for, but voters all the same.
Well, speaking of voters in the district, finally we're going to mention Vista City Council member Karina Contreras, who got into the race in late December and has only raised $13,000 and has $12,000 on hand. Yeah,
so hasn't shown a big ability to raise money, but she sort of, I think, represents a void in the race otherwise, and that she's probably the most progressive of the Democratic candidates, and she does represent part of the district where it lives in Oceanside, which is a big area with unique political issues. So she may not be the world's most competitive person. She's new to a lot of local politics, but there's a viable path there, or a viable reason for her candidacy, I think.
Okay. So this is all a good segue into what I think most of the folks who are going to tune into this want to really hear, which is Amar versus Marty, right? That's what we all want to talk about and all we want to hear. So let's talk about that. Neither of them live anywhere near Palm Springs, let alone the district. We won't get into that. Both of them have to introduce themselves to Palm Springs and the rest of the district. It seems like they both have obtained significant endorsements, credible endorsements, and they've raised a reasonable amount of money, both of them. Amar has raised more, but he's also spent more. So let's talk about this dynamic. Now, if you're a voter in any part of this district and you're looking for the Democrat that is going to provide the best contrast with Darrell Issa in November, who are you going to pick between those two people? What do you think, Sarah?
I think Marnie is the one who has, a record to stand on, and that's going to matter to people, both as an elected official and as a prosecutor, which is something she touts. So I think, Amar's probably likely to play up his military background, which is something that Darrell Issa has as well and is, pretty meaningful in this region. But other than that, I think that, I would assume Marnie would play up her status as an elected official and her record as a prosecutor.
What do we think has led to Amar outraising Marnie by about $300,000 so far? Andy, what are your thoughts there?
Well, so he is in a long-term relationship with Representative Sarah Jacobs, who is one of the wealthiest members of Congress. I am sure that plays a part in that, and if for no other reason than access to large donors who run in those circles. He also has lots of name recognition based on having run 3 different campaigns in this county, one of which was pretty high profile at the time. So I can see how he was able to raise a lot of money. I think that's not much of a mystery.
I think that makes good sense. I want to cast this two-person kind of face-off in a very specific way for each of you. I want to get your thoughts on what I'm about to say. I generally agree with you, Sarah, that I think on paper, Marnie is probably the more compelling person to defeat Darrell Issa in November for a lot of folks who are meeting these people for the first time. You look at Amar, he's run 3 times. He's been defeated all 3 times. The Republicans have a playbook on how to beat him when he runs for Congress. Marnie has never lost a race. I think her politics kind of hew fairly closely to the demographics of the district. Amar's politics have been kind of all over the place depending on what he's running for. Now, all that being said, I think a potential equalizer is, 1, the fact that Amar has been able to raise more money than Marnie has, and 2, if we remember, in 2020, when Sarah Jacobs ran for the seat she currently holds for the first time, she got many $million in support from a super PAC that was funded by her family. Now, Sarah Jacobs and Amar Campanajjar have been in a relationship for a very long time now. It's been, I think, 6 years or so, give or take. I'm guessing here, maybe longer. If the Jacobs family comes through for Amar the way they did for Sarah, do you think all of that money could equalize the field a little bit and maybe even put Amar as the front runner in this race? What do we think?
I think when Sarah Jacobs ran, she was able to kind of really articulate a good pitch as to why she should represent this area in Congress despite not having much of a record in office or really any record in office. And so certainly the money is going to help. In a race that's all about name recognition, you have to have money. But I think the question is whether he can come up with that pitch. What are you going to do with the money? How are you going to message this campaign? Because like you said, it's really unclear sort of what his positions are given or depending on which race he's running. So I think it has to come with that pitch. And I'm not clear on what that is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing is like, so on the one hand, the fact that he's run different races for different offices, sure, that gives Marnie van Wolpert a sort of case to prosecute that, hey, he's changed in these things, or he's at different times said things that are going to be wildly objectionable to Democratic voters. But it also just means as we sit here today, I don't know how he's going to try to frame himself. I don't, when he first came into our lives, he was sort of framing himself as like a Bernie type.
Yep.
And then he was saying, I will be the most conservative Democrat in Congress. And he was appealing to these sort of like pro-gun groups and other, similar types out in East County. So that puts him on a spectrum of where he may land that is like the entirety of the Democratic spectrum. So I just don't know what we expect to hear from him at this point, especially given a district that's like pretty toss-up-y.
And yeah, I think both of you have made good points. It should be interesting to see how this plays out. We are going to have to see how both Marnie and Amar present themselves, especially in opposition to one another. We also have to see what Brandon Riker does with all that money. All right, so let's move on to the gubernatorial race now. The race no one seems to want to run for or win. It's strange. I mean, California is they say the fifth largest, the sixth largest, whatever, a huge economy. It's the most important state in the union. It's California. It occupies a space in the public imagination that is second to none. And yet no major figures this cycle seem to want to be its governor, which is curious. And I'm going to raise the question as to why that is. But before we get to that, I'm going to share the most recent polling numbers that we have. I'm going to give you the top 5. And maybe, Sarah, you can give us a quick hit on each of these folks.
Okay.
So the first person, Republican Chad Bianco at 18%.
So Chad Bianco's the Riverside County Sheriff. And I think all we know about him essentially are law enforcement positions. And so, he's a big crime and safety guy to the extent that those are buzzwords he talks about a lot. But does Chad Bianco have a plan for housing? I don't know.
That's a very fair question. Okay, next on the list, Republican Steve Hilton, 17%.
So Steve Hilton is a former Fox News personality, also held some roles in the British government, of all things. Not sure whether that will be much of an asset here, but yeah, he's the other big Republican candidate.
All right, now we get into the Democrats. The first Democrat on the list, Cate Porter, 14%.
So Cate Porter's no longer in office, but represented portions of Orange County and became sort of, to the extent that any member of Congress can become a celebrity, she created a lot of viral moments, grilling CEOs and other business leaders. So very much like a consumer financial protection vibe is, I think, what she's pitching to voters.
Next on the list, Eric Swalwell, 12%.
Eric Swalwell is one of the only people in the field who is a current elected official, and I think that's part of what's boosting his numbers. They're all sort of stuck in neutral around the same amount. But he's a member of Congress who represents portions of the Bay Area around Castro Valley.
And rounding out our top 5 for today, Tom Steyer, 8%.
If a billionaire can be a populist, that is the pitch that he's trying to make. We'll see. That's a pretty tough needle to thread, but that's the lane he's staking out.
I suppose stranger things have happened. I have my doubts. I just want to say something quickly about this race. There have been quite a bit of hand-wringing around the fact that there are 2 Republicans leading in the polling. It has caused a lot of folks to say, well, the Democrats are going to blow this and 2 Republicans are going to get through the primary. I just want to be very clear, that is not going to happen. I just want to put aside the alarmism. This conversation comes up with every major statewide office, every cycle. At some point during the race, the polling shows 2 Republicans leading. Everyone loses their mind. Relax. Let's just forget about that. Okay, now let's move on to the actual gristle here. What I don't understand, and I say that facetiously, I understand it a little bit. It feels like this race has been defined by who is not running. Mm-hmm. Sarah, can you give us a quick understanding of why people don't want to be governor?
I think being governor is a really, really hard job. If you look at some of the people who have opted out, people like Alex Padilla, I mean, he can sit in that Senate seat for the rest of his career and have a really easy time. And it involves travel back and forth, but he's not really somebody who has to pass a lot of bills. He's mostly just standing on California's business and making, California's perspective heard in the Senate, grilling, nominees and things like that. He's a member of the Judiciary Committee. Same with Kamala Harris. I mean, she has bigger jobs that she would rather have. If you look at how Gavin Newsom has taken the blame, rightly in many regards, for some of California's biggest failures, I mean, you get a lot dumped on your shoulders when you're the governor in a way that you don't really have to deal with when you're a member of Congress.
So what I'm hearing you say is nobody wants to work anymore.
Yeah.
It's a tough job.
It is. That's fair. All right. So Andy, let's talk about the people that are in the field. Mm-hmm. Why do you think no one has kind of reached out and grabbed this race and made it their own?
Well, what I had been saying for months when people asked me who I thought was going to win was that I thought the next governor was not in the field yet. And I mean, it still feels that way to me. The reason is, I think if you look back at the last quarter century in California, we elect celebrities as governors. Some of the time that is very literally the case with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Sometimes it's as close as you can be to a celebrity as a politician with either Gavin Newsom or Jerry Brown. So say what you will about any of these candidates on their merits. I think it's clear that most of them are not that type of celebrity. I think, as you say, Cate Porter had her viral moments, but it's more like legislative celebrity in that case. I think sort of the only person that we haven't mentioned so far that's sort of walking into this field sensing a void was San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan. So, and maybe he thinks he can thread this needle of like a centrist Democrat who sort of, as mayor, can sort of pitch himself that's a straighter analogy towards being governor, and that he's dealt with the specific problems that he'll be dealing with as governor. But I don't know if he can keep raising money the way he has been able to come out of the gate with it, and certainly mayor of San Jose is not going to be the type of thing that gives you name recognition across the state.
That's true. And he was polling at about 5% when the last poll came out.
I think the other big question mark, the one being whether there's some big candidate in waiting who we haven't seen yet, is when and whether Democrats are going to step in and say, like, enough. Yep. 10 of you need to get out.
Right. That does seem to happen every time this situation tends to pass. So no, that's good analysis from both of you. You both lived up to the hype. I appreciate it. I just want to say one thing to everyone we mentioned, every candidate we mentioned during this panel. We would like to have you on the show. Andy will treat you fairly. It won't be me, don't worry. Andy will treat you very fairly. He will give you plenty of time to make your case. Please come on the show so we can hear directly why you should be the next either member of Congress or governor of California. Thanks. I'm back here with Andy. Andy, I have a take. It's not the most serious thing in the world, but I don't think University Heights is a real neighborhood.
Interesting. What is it?
I think it's either North Park or it's Hillcrest, depending on where you are, either side of Park Boulevard. But I mean, let me just set this out. First of all, this city has innumerable community planning groups. They have a community planning group for basically every neighborhood. University Heights, not a part of any. There is no University Heights community planning group. It is either part of North Park or it is part of Uptown. It doesn't have its own CPG. Second, University Heights. Where is the university exactly? College area, we know where the college is. Mm-hmm. University City, we know where the university is. University Heights, where is the university?
When I first moved to San Diego, I lived right near there, and I asked myself all the time, is there a college nearby? What am I not getting here?
Right.
I think we know that's after the name of the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine, but it's actually, the road does not intersect with the neighborhood in any meaningful way. It is well south of what University Heights is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Like the most generous assessment of where University Heights begins is the north side of El Cajon Boulevard, which is north of University Avenue.
Yeah. Adams Heights? How about Adams Heights?
We could just call it North Park and Hillcrest and just not say that that's a neighborhood. I mean, culturally, most of it is like North Park anyway. I don't see why it has to be a neighborhood. I'm going to say I'm out on University Heights. No. All right, so now more seriously, we've talked a lot this episode and last episode about taxes and fees. And, I keep having this thought in my head about the situation in San Diego with the taxes and fees. And there's this saying in Italian literature, and I'm going to say it in Italian, so please indulge me. Se vogliamo che tutto rimanga come, bisogna che tutto cambi, which translated means the more we want things to stay the same, everything needs to change, which is not only extremely Italian sentiment, I think it's applicable to San Diego here, because the fact of the matter is, if you want things to stay the way they are, something is going to have to change. Either there's going to have to be more taxes and fees, the money's going to have to come from somewhere. We can't just say, no, I want everything to stay the same, but nothing can change. I'm not going to pay anymore. The money can't come from anywhere. Like, we do have to figure something out. Am I right or wrong about that?
You know, I don't know, but I will say that there's a lot of banners in Little Italy right now of Italian Americans that, as far as I know, have never stepped foot in San Diego.
True.
You've just made a pretty compelling case to replace at least one of them.
And I am an elected official, so give that a thought, Little Italy Association. No, I'm not serious about that. That would be deeply embarrassing, but thank you for the thought. I think we can leave it there. I think this is a pretty good episode. So until next time, look after one another and be kind.